Good evening. A big week for Norwich City starts here. West Brom at Carrow Road this evening, followed, of course, by the big one on Sunday against Ipswich Town, which we will have plenty of time to look ahead or not look ahead to, depending on how it unfolds tonight. We will bring you the team news from Carrow Road directly, and in fact, I can do that for you now. Here is how Norwich City line up. It is Kovacevic in goal, Stacey, Darling, Cordoba and Fisher at the back four, Matson and Kenny McLean the midfield two, Sienats on the right, Schwartau on the left, with Emi Marcondes behind Josh Sargent. So I'll just run through that again for you. It's Kovacevic in goal, Stacey, Darling, Cordoba and Fisher is the back four for the Canaries, Matson and Kenny McLean as the midfield two, Sienats, we expect that to be on the right, Schwartau on the left, with Emi Marcondes behind Josh Sargent. The subs bench is Grimshaw, Jakov Medic, Lucian Mahovo makes his first appearance of the Championship campaign on the bench, Jeffrey Schlupp, Jacob Wright, Mirko Topic, Liam Gibbs, Mate Jurasek and Jovan Makama. Paddy, should we start defensively? Medic out, Jose Cordoba in. What do you make of that change?
An interesting one, Connor. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm down where Liam Manning will be addressing this after the game. So, and I took a picture on the way in. I'm going off on a tangent, but there's the most beautiful rainbow arcing over Carrow Road tonight. I'm going to post it after this. Surely that's a good omen. Surely we've got to cling to something anyway. But to the team news, yeah, I mean, almost suggests that he wasn't overly impressed with Medic, maybe what he saw at the weekend. Although it might be a reflection of what he expects threat-wise from West Brom, and Cordoba is a very different profile of centre-back for me. I think we can all see that. A bit more athletic, certainly more mobile than Medic. Without having seen the West Brom team news, maybe it's a response to that. I don't think he was any better or any worse than any of the other defensive players at the weekend for me, Medic. So that's an interesting one. Maybe it's one of those that, Cordoba's had to come out the side, and if he's looking for an edge and almost for players to go back in and prove him wrong, then maybe there's an element of that. But that is an interesting one. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And then the only other change is Makama out and Marcondes in, isn't it? So that would suggest overall he was relatively happy with elements of what he saw at Stoke from most of those players. But yeah, no, it's an interesting one. Yeah, I mean, I can only assume by the fact that Medic's on the bench, there's nothing fitness related there. If there was, he wouldn't be in the match day 20. So you have to think that's probably, for me, more a reflection of what he expects from West Brom tonight, and maybe they need that greater mobility in the centre of the pitch. Because if I match those two up in terms of on the ball, you'd say Medic is better. He's more accomplished. He's more polished. He's got range of diagonal passing. I think is far superior to Cordoba. So that wouldn't suggest to me he's made that switch with a view to in possession. It's maybe more defensively and counteracting what he feels maybe West Brom are going to offer. And, for me personally, I asked Liam about this midweek. I'd like to see Wright in there just because of this ongoing seemingly struggle to get hold of the ball, to control the ball. Jacob Wright would offer you that. But no, he's gone with Matson and McLean again tonight. To be fair, Matson was reasonable, I thought, at Stoke. And Kenny gives you what he gives you, that level of performance, fairly consistent. But probably more interesting, the fact that he's dropped Marcondes in there, because that clearly is with a view to getting on the ball, controlling it a bit better, trying to get support in and around Sargent, all those elements that were glaringly missing, again, not for the first time at Stoke. But I'll bowl that one back to you, Connor. Where do you think he's gone with the Medic out and Cordoba in?
Yeah, surprised actually, because I thought Medic did okay in terms of some of that last ditch defending that we saw on Saturday. Maybe it is just 3-game week, a load point, like you say, the fitness point. We can't preempt anything on that clearly until we speak to Liam after the game. But yeah, it is a surprise. I think I'm sure Cordoba will be delighted to get a reprieve after what was a difficult day for him against Wrexham. It feels like a real opportunity here. I mean, as Finlay says, he said last chance. I wouldn't quite go that strong, but it's definitely an opportunity for him, I guess, to try and make amends for what was a very difficult outing, albeit not in the position that he would like to play in. So, yeah, that's a big call. For me, the most interesting one is Jovan Makama out. After what was a pretty impressive hour or so at Stoke on Saturday, where he scored a goal, and obviously 2-2 now for him. He's been dropped out for Antti Sienats, and that for me is an intriguing one. I mean, as Liam said post game, it maybe points to where he's at fitness-wise. And like we said, you've got another game on Sunday. You can't lose the view of that. But yeah, I mean, just to get you on that one, Paddy, Jovan Makama not included in the starting 11 feels harsh after what he did at Stoke and was probably one of Norwich City's brightest performers that day.
He was. I mean, he certainly has added impact in the cameos he's had, culminating in the last 2 games. He's, back-to-back goals. I mean, that's not to be dismissed lightly. But for me, it feels probably fitness-related. The fact that, what was it? It was only about 50 minutes in and the tank had been emptied. Liam talked about this at his pre-match, that he was looking at him and he was stretching and almost his eyes and his gut told him, maybe off the back of this issue they have seemingly in keeping players fit and recovering players, that he was erring on the side of caution. But if that's 50 minutes and he's basically having to say his race is run, then I'm not surprised that 2-3 days on from that they don't think probably it's the wisest move to go with him from the start, because the nature of it is this game could be in the balance midway through the second half. And we've already seen that in those type of scenarios, he's good. He can come on, he can affect the play. He scored in that setting against Wrexham here last time. I think that's probably a cautious move based on the guy's fitness rather than his performance levels, because I don't think you would necessarily dip him out and keep a Cernak in if it's purely on performance, let's be honest. And also the flip side of that, even with Makama in that side, they were still structurally, for me, lacking, the lack of support to Sargent, the fact that it was almost just try and hit Makama, hit Sargent, play off the seconds. I don't think that was necessarily giving them that control that they need to now try and find. Marcondes will give you that if he can be worked into those pockets between midfield and forward areas. He's a very intelligent player, that movement he's got. And I think, to me, that is Liam Manning saying that we need to have players in and around the more progressive areas of the pitch who can dictate, can get on the ball, can bring others into play. And I think we'd all be saying that Makama, that isn't him. He's more of a power, athleticism, stretch the play, occupy defenders. I don't think he's necessarily going to come into midfield areas and look to build and link the play and bring players in from wider areas, and also crucially allow Sargent maybe to play a bit higher up the pitch, not having to drop deeper as he was in the last 2 or 3 games. So for me, that call there is probably 2-pronged. I think it is probably the fitness element with Makama, but also hoping that you drop in a technically competent player in Marcondes, that you're going to aim at least to try and get far more of the ball than they've had thus far in those areas of the pitch.
Yeah, it does feel like maybe a change geared towards just giving them a little bit more control, and Marcondes adding that energy into a forward area where they've really struggled to connect to. Doesn't feel like the worst shout in the world. Let's bring you the West Brom team, which we can do now, and the headline for them is just one change, and that is that Hegebo, has dropped out of their starting lineup, and he's been replaced by Josh Matcher. So they've got Griffiths in goal, Campbell, Phillips, Mepham and Taylor, Malumbi and Mowat as the midfield 2, Ilong Jr. And Johnson on either flank, with Isaac Price, who's made quite an impressive start to life at West Brom, behind Josh Madger. Their subbench, Wildsmith, Styles, Bielik, Gilchrist, Collier, Diakite, Hegebo, Wallace and Bostock as well. And it's been quite interesting speaking to one of my colleagues that cover West Brom, and kind of said the performances from their perspective has been good. It's maybe just been that final bit, that scoring goals and putting the ball into the back of the net. From what he said, they played very well on Friday against Leicester. I think that was televised, that game, but I didn't see it, but I heard they had lots of the ball and were the better team. So it goes to show, Paddy, I guess, that this is on Norwich tonight, isn't it, to show progress. And it does feel like some of those changes, particularly in forward areas, with, I guess, seeing that Marcondes, Schwartau in there again as well, that all of that feels geared to, obviously, behind them, that midfield 2 of Maatsen, who was one of Norwich's better performers and threaded through that lovely ball to Jack Stacey for the goal at Stoke. All of this feels geared towards perhaps finding a little bit of a better balance in terms of those midfield areas for Norwich, which I think, as we broke down in the pod, feels absolutely pivotal for them to make progress.
But also in the context of, playing a West Brom team who, again, not seen too much of them, but by all reports, they do want to dominate the ball. They do want to have that control in those key areas of the pitch. So for me, Liam Manning, what we can't have, we've seen the story, we've seen the film, and it's not a great watch. We can't have Stoke again. We can't have Coventry. Even elements of the Carrow Road performances, Middlesbrough springs to mind, where Norwich is so inferior in terms of possession, in terms of territory, and it just becomes a dig in and cling on, to be giving them their due. Usually they have something to cling on to in most of those games I've referenced, but it doesn't feel sustainable. It doesn't feel a template that's going to progress this from where it is now, which is very patchy, to be brutally honest, and probably a little bit diplomatic. So if that is the case, and you're coming up against another team who want to get on the ball, who want to dominate, then you have to do something that disrupts them from achieving that. Because if it becomes a game where West Brom have the majority of the possession and most of the game is in the Norwich half, the fear is then that if it didn't happen for them against Leicester the other night, that they do find that clinical cutting edge and maybe convert that weight of territory and possession and chances. And it's the same old story for Norwich. That has something clearly has to change in terms of how Manning is setting his team up and how they're going about it. And for me, my Condes in is a clear example of that he feels that, I mean, I said to him midweek, do you structurally need to change something? And what I was getting at was maybe extra bodies in the middle of the park to try and control that aspect of it. And, we'll see how this plays out. But it feels to me that maybe is a recognition of it, that thus far that the way they've set about it and tried to progress the play hasn't worked. The stats tell you that. As you said, we had a very deep dive into that on the latest podcast, and the numbers in many of those key metrics make for stark reading. And all of that suggests that something had to change. And let's hope that tonight that team news is the first signal. Those players now need to go out and perform. But if Norwich can match maybe West Brom in terms of parity in possession and territory, then, as we said on the podcast, they have, by common consent, the best striker in the division. And if they get enough of the ball, you would like to think they'll get enough opportunities to feed that best striker in the division and then let him do what he has proven he can do over this last 2 or 3 seasons in this league, which is score goals.
I'm just intrigued to kind of highlight a couple of maybe subtle changes, but Harry Darling, you would imagine with Jose Cordoba coming into the team, will swap from left to right. That feels like quite a small change, but can have a big impact in terms of how things played. And I don't want to highlight Antti Sienats in particular. There's been a few comments about him, so maybe I'll group him with Jose Cordoba. But they are 2 players that have had opportunities this season, and probably part of the cohort that was signed last season that we're probably looking at. If Norwich City are going to make progress, you need a few of those guys actually to make progress individually to up their performance levels. They haven't quite been there this season. I think Antti Sienats was very candid in that chat he had with Sam over the international break. You just hope that, having been dipped out to now be brought back in, that both of those players maybe can, take that opportunity tonight, which is something they haven't been able to do so far this season.
Yeah, I mean, it's Cernach, we feel like we talk about him on a liberal routine basis, but he hasn't delivered from even the levels. I think he was 1 in 3 goal contributions last season, debut season in England. His age bracket in terms of that division, he was there right there, 1 or 2 ranked for his age profile in the division. So you then expect, even with the head coach change, even with a lot of players coming in, players going out, that he moves on from that level, and it simply hasn't happened. He's had ample opportunity. He's been tried in various different positions. As he said himself, he knows he needs to deliver. And it wasn't specifically referencing Cernach, but there was a line, I think, post Stoke, I think it might have been from Liam, where it was maybe off the back of, well, you made 5 changes, one of those enforced obviously with Papagiallo, but what was the thinking behind generally those changes? And it was, paraphrasing, but it was kind of, well, the ones who've had an opportunity haven't delivered. They haven't stood up. They haven't produced. And it gets to a point where enough's enough almost. And I have to be honest, I think if Chris Garden remains fit, and certainly if Giallo remains fit, I think by now Cernach has been dipped out, because reasonably he couldn't argue if he had come out of the side purely on what he hasn't delivered. So he's fortunate in that regard. But that said, and he is a young player, and you get the sense, we don't obviously know and don't see him day in, day out, but he is still very much a confidence player. I think he's quite an introverted type of character. That's my sense anyway, my reading of it. And maybe he just needs a game, he needs a performance, he needs maybe a goal, he needs an assist, and then we'll see. That confidence, that natural confidence, will just kick him on again. But there needs to be a spark come from somewhere, and he needs to deliver it. It isn't enough now that he keeps getting opportunities and he keeps falling below the standards we know he's capable of. And let's be honest, we all hoped that would be the base mark level this season, and he'd actually raise the bar. Simply hasn't happened so far, and it needs to happen because the rest of the team structurally in midfield and forward areas isn't functioning. So there's even more focus and even more attention on him to actually step up.
Yes, indeed, and let's hope that is tonight. Lots of interesting bits in that team news. Obviously, first kind of 3-game week in the Championship, so there was always going to be changes, but I think some of those are really, really interesting. It's going to be interesting to hear Liam's take on that as well, and as always, how they will get reflected on will hinge on the result, I guess. One other player I wanted to touch upon, Paddy, because we've not done our Mate Jurasek segment for a little while on this, which seems to be the case, or has been the case since January, really, for the last 10 months. On the bench again, obviously started in that Wrexham game. I think we could all see probably where he needs to get to in terms of fitness levels, but there was a flash of quality for that goal, teeing up Jack Stacey for the opener. Would you have liked to have seen him back in the side today, in that kind of mission that we've spoken about, for a little bit more creativity and attacking thrust in maybe off one of those wide areas?
Yes, in a word, but I guess if you're making a change, maybe Marcondes is seen as a bit of a safer play in terms of what he knows he's going to get from that player. He's far more experienced. He understands what this league's all about. He's a proven performer in this league. So in terms of margins of what I'm going to get from these players, going back to my previous point there, because so much of this still feels a work in progress. I think you're probably weighing up the degree of risk you can afford to make at this stage. Tonight is a 5th opportunity to get a first win on the board competitively at Carrow Road, League and Cup, of course, but that brings its own pressure. And Liam Manning knows that if we walk away from here tonight and it's 0-5. Those questions are going to continue and probably intensify. So maybe that limits the degree of, let's go hell for leather. Let's put Jurasek in. Let's put Marcondes in. Let's really sort of roll the dice, as it were, against obviously a team who are proving themselves to be certainly one of those who are going to be, I think, in that top 6 conversation. That might seem, with hindsight, to be a policy that is a little bit too much of a gamble. So I can see tonight why maybe Jurasek, he hasn't gone from the start, but it is a little bit frustrating because even albeit he's tired, as you would expect against Wrexham, I thought there was glimpses culminating in that assist for Jack Stacey that there is a player with the quality to actually make a difference. And without labouring the point, there's Josh Sargent aside. Has there too many attacking midfield players made a difference this season for Norwich? I don't think they have. So he must feel a little bit hard done by that. He's not had an opportunity since Wrexham, but as Liam Manning says, it's almost the thing that keeps him awake at night is which players maybe need to stay in the side to play through whatever they're playing through, which ones have to come out and maybe go again. And it's kind of that balancing act. And he has to put the pieces together of this jigsaw. And at the moment, clearly, in the likes of Marcondes and Cernach, and maybe even Swartow now. Swartow's a good example. Maybe he feels within the margins of performance, he knows what he's going to get from Swartow. Now, it might not be that eye-catching. It might not have that quality that maybe Jurasek could deliver, but he kind of knows it's going to be maybe a 6 or a 7 out of 10. With Jurasek, maybe at this stage, could be a 7 or 8, could be a 4 or 5. But the chicken and egg element of that is until he actually gets in and gets a regular run of games, when are we going to see that? When are we going to see him go from player who can come off the bench to actually a starter? And of course, given how much they spent on him and how highly they rate him, with each passing game he doesn't start a game, those questions continue to mount.
There's been a lot of focus, clearly, on what comes next, what comes after this game, that trip to Suffolk, the East Anglian derby, everything that comes with that, the record. But I don't think anyone should lose sight of tonight and the importance of it. Carrow Road, we know what the record has been here this season. We know what the performances have been like over the last 3 games. And I think you can kind of paint it both ways, can't you? If Norwich City were to continue that trend, you could see this crowd being very unhappy. That narrative, that mood that isn't in the best place at the moment amongst them, bleeding then into that East Anglian derby, and a feeling probably of trepidation more than excitement or opportunity, or however you want to catch it ahead of that one. Of course, the opposite is true. If they could get a result here tonight, then it changes, doesn't it? I think they would go above Ipswich in the table and everything. Albeit Ipswich have a game in hand, and things feel a little more merry. So it does feel like an important game tonight, Paddy. So yeah, start with that, and then of course let's end with your prediction and how you see it going from a Norwich City perspective this evening.
Well, on the first point, I mean, we put that to Lee and we said, and again, we've just come off the back of a press conference where he's made it clear. I mean, he said post Stoke we're miles away from where we need to be. So he's not trying to kid anybody. We can all see, and he can see it himself. And he's obviously the one who's tasked with trying to improve this and improve it quickly. But that said, he made the point that tonight, 2 or 3 days later, Ipswich away, that is a twin pair of games where you can really turbocharge what has not happened up to this point. And he actually broadened it out and talked about, we're only starting to get into that period of a championship season where it is a 3-game week and then maybe a break and then another 3-game week. And momentum shifts, as he said, can change within the course of 7 days. If you back up results in this league, that can be enough to get you out of that big block of clubs below the top 7, 8, and get yourself in that contention. And that's why 2 positive results, 2 positive performances over the next few days, and it won't mask or a lot of the issues that have gone into this first part of the season. It won't overlook those, but the world will feel a brighter place, certainly if you come back from Portman Road and beaten for me. So I think that's why he's right to accentuate these are now opportunities the next 2 days. Don't be daunted by it. That's the message to his players. Step forward, make the most of these opportunities, and the others this time next week, if they've got 2 positive results, and that international break, which is what they go into after Ipswich, feels a whole lot shorter and a whole lot more optimistic than their one feel. The alternative, get beat tonight, 16 years and out on Sunday, that's going to feel like a long, long, long 2 weeks for anybody connected with Norwich City. So we don't need to overhype these next 2 games, but I think it's right to point out that this already at this stage of the season under Liam Manning feels like quite a defining period.
Prediction?
Prediction-wise, I'm going to more hope than expectation, but I'm going to go with a draw today, score draw, and at least that will end this wretched run. I think tonight, if they lose, aren't they? Is that the first time ever they've started the season with 4 league defeats at home? That's an unwanted record. Nobody wants that on their CV. So it'd stop that. It'd stop that element of the discourse, and it'd also give them something to build up to and into Sunday. So score draw for me, Connor. You?
I'm going to go for a Norwich win based on absolutely nothing at all, but just a real hope that at some point this has got to turn, and there's got to be some signs of progress. So out of purely hope and on absolutely no logic or basis for anything that's based in reality or on what we've seen over the last 7 games, I will go for that, and I'll go for a 2-1 Norwich maybe. There's a lot. It probably is, to be honest. We've been doing these team news videos for a long time. I think since lockdown when we first started doing these and COVID football. There's a lot of defeats on here tonight, which is really the first time that I've kind of seen a lot of that. I mean, Steve's gone for 2-1 West Brom. Nick's gone for 3-1 West Brom. There's a lot of people maybe feeling in a certain way. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how we get on tonight, and it feels like the start of a big few days for Norwich City. Thank you all very much for watching. Of course, Pinkin.com, the place to go for all the analysis and reaction to this game. Paddy will be speaking to Liam Manning after the game, obviously looking ahead partly to that game on Sunday. Let's see what we get tonight. As Paddy said, there was a rainbow over Carrow Road earlier. Let's hope at the end of it is some points. See you soon.